Okay, from the end of the last lecture video, I had just got done installing Passport, Passport Local, and the two typings for those two libraries as well. So now that we have a little bit of idea of what Passport is for, what it does well, what I think it doesn't do well, let's just learn how to use it. So Passport is a node.js middleware, but the ballin' part about it is that it can act very easily. It can be connected to several different, not just Express, several different connecting and API building libraries, Express being one of them. Anything that has what's called a connect function can actually utilize Passport. So it's not just an Express thing. Keep that in mind. It's a node thing in general. We're going to go ahead and import the Passport library. And how do we connect it to Express? Because that's because we have it required or imported here. It has no bearing on being connected as an available middleware on our apps. So we're going to do so by simply saying app.use passport.initialize, and that is it. Passport is now an available middleware somewhere on our routes if we want it to be. But as of right now, it does nothing for us. Just because it's initialized on our app to say these two things are connected, that's all it means. They're connected, but we haven't written anything of what it can do. So what we have to do before actually initializing it is wiring up Passport with the strategies we wish to be using. And then we say, hey, Express, you're going to initialize with Passport that has all these following strategies already coded on it. We got to make sure that we wire up Passport before we initialize it. So for now, let's see what that might look like. Unfortunately, the .use feature is not going anywhere because we're going to have to tell, hey, Passport, use the following strategy. All right? It's going to have to look like this, unfortunately. So that .use and middleware, it's middleware all the way down when it comes to Express. So get used to writing your own and be familiar with reading how they work because it's middlewares as far as the eye can see. So this Passport that we're initializing with here and connecting to our Express server is going to have the following strategy written on it. And we have to actually import it and use it. So I'm going to paste that little import statement, say passport-local. A lot of the times, I don't think this actually matters. Well, hold on. It probably does matter for TypeScript. They might have some certain namespace they export that you have to import it as. Sometimes with the default export, you can call it whatever you want. But from the documentation, they typically recommend calling it this anyway. And we're going to kind of follow that paradigm. So new passport local dot strategy is a new class, I believe, we are instantiating, which means we have to invoke that constructor argument. We haven't talked about OOP in a while, folks, have we? So new passport local dot strategy, there's that constructor function. The constructor function takes two arguments, a configuration or config or options object, and after that, a callback function. And that callback function is going to have to look up something in the database, so we could use the .then syntax, or I can use async await. All right? Super fun. So what do we need inside of here? By default, Passport is coded to look for a username. So we have to override a property called username field and say, hey, we're actually going to be using a field called email. How does it know what that means? This value, email, must be a direct match to our rec.body over here. So because I'm logging in with emails, rec.body.email instead of username, this is where I come into the username field and say use rec.body.email. That's what that email value is representative of. That's where it comes from. So if I called this value pizza, it would then have to be pizza written over here as well. But because it says email, it's email over here. Okay? That's the relationship. Next, that's enough. The default option for this options object should be okay as long as you just override that username field. Then down here, it will automatically do what our login route already does. Let's bring it up in a separate window. It's going to do this for us already, so I don't have to write that myself. It's provided to us in this function arguments. It gives us the rec.body email and the rec.body.password ready to go so we can do what we want to do. Now, how does the strategy know it's done doing its job, right? How does it know? Do I call like a response? Do I say return and a value? Do I send an error? I mean, what do I do, right? Like, how do I know that this thing is done, right? How does it know it's done to go to the next step of the process if it has to, or fail if it has to? Well, there's literally a function all over the place in Passport called the done function. It is a function that runs when the job's done, whether it's with an error or not an error. So that's going to be a common mainstay in all of your Passport code, that done function. All right, now that we have that, we should probably go ahead and prepare a try-catch block. We are going to simply daisy chain the error upwards if it's something happened. So we're going to call the done function and pass the error as the argument. The done function has the following syntax. It has any errors and then something called your rec user, or user if it's succeeded. So in the event we don't have an error, we'll simply replace it with null. If there's an error or something happened, it's going to be the first argument we pass to the done callback function, which is why we're just calling done error down here. So what happens is this done error, we'll pass it up to probably this route when we combine it as a middleware right in between here. There's going to be a little Passport middleware right in between these two values as another argument. And that done error will throw the error, which will throw it up here, which will get caught right here, log what the error is, and tell us that we suck, evidently. Okay, good to know. So there's a problem. That's how that done error is going to work. Next, it has to do the same logic we had from here. It needs to attempt to find that user's email. So let's take it out over here and do so. Oh, need that DB function. So let's go ahead and copy that import statement. And we're going to paste it up here temporarily. I'm going to move it down over here for like a little testing ground almost. So I'm going to make it closer to the code right here, because it's going to be moved to its own file, because you're going to realize this is not a good idea to code a whole bunch of logic in your server.ts file, which should be pretty just only what the server needs to know, not everything. So again, we're coding that because we have to have it done before Passport, but I'll show you a better way to do that. All right, got to do that user found, and it's going to do the exact same check. The exact same kind of logic right here, where I'm going to get rid of all this stuff, the chunk of it though. You can do like an if else like that if y'all want to. And we got to bring in compare hash. So I think, can I auto complete that? Quick fix. Yeah, import compare hash, right? From passwords. Excellent. Auto import thanks to TypeScript. I just like to see. That way it automatically does that. And then here, if all this checks out, we get to call done null, because there's no error, and the user that we found. We're going to daisy chain that user information up to the next step, and we can do whatever we please with it. Why not just create the token here? You totally could. I wouldn't, though, because this is going to be simply for the logic of what happens on the login. We're going to daisy chain the user's information back out here. And this particular guy, gal, whatever it wants to be, this particular thing is going to be still in its sole purpose is to retrieve and receive this user found info, right? And what it's going to do is still make the token and send the token as a response. But we're moving that logic of the authentication workflow out, but we're going to leave the token creation in the login request itself, because that's token creation for our particular app, and it has nothing to do with Passport simply authenticating these credentials of email and password. So in the event the user is not found or these passwords fail, again, I like being generic in my error handling to make sure would-be hackers don't get anything valuable information-wise. So we can pass in null, because there's no argument, or there's no error. We can do false because we can say that no user was found, and honestly, this is enough. But I'll show you something cool you can do with that afterwards, maybe if I remember. But this is, I told y'all this is going to be the bare bones walkthrough. It's just enough to get it working. And check that out. All right, this is what the local strategy is going to look like. And as you can tell, if we had 4 more strategies, this server.ts file would get busy and not be very fun to debug if there's problems. So let's learn a better way to do this. I need this code written in its own file, but I also need it to run sometime here, or somewhere above this line of code. And we're going to see how to do that with these errors here. So what I may do is make a new folder called middlewares. Middlewares is a folder. And inside of here, I might make a new file, and we'll call it passport-strategies. And something that's cool for organization, if y'all didn't know this, you can add your own little custom extensions. So you could do .mw.ts. And that way, when you import this file somewhere, it'll say passport-strategies.mw. You will know that that file that you're importing or requiring is solely for some middleware, so you don't accidentally think, or if you're on a team of 60 people, they can't claim to have accidentally imported a middleware file and use it as not a middleware. I didn't really ever think about that, but again, this little demonstration is talking about good concepts to know, fundamentals to know, and just good organization structure. Because at the end of the day, my recommendation for organizing code is always just move things around until it feels right. So paste that code. Let's fix our imports now by simply moving up one directory now. We have to have passport imported here as well, and the local one. So I'm going to copy those two and get rid of that local import right there. Come back over here, place the imports. You know me, I like having my asterisk as up top, my non-asterisk defaults, and then my specific named exports or imports at the bottom there, organized that way. So there we go. This file should be good, but just because we made this file doesn't mean it's ever going to magically run itself when we want it to. And I realize there's errors in my login thing here, so let's just comment this out in my login right here, just so I can. There we go. Just setting up my code so I can actually test stuff and not worry about it breaking. This also super cleans up the login rather than that we're here. I mean, we don't need these things in here anymore. So I'm going to ditch all those, and actually we need config. We need config, we don't need DB. There we go. Because those two will come back into play for the token right there. So again, just because I have this file written here and technically code-wise looks fine, when does it ever get imported anywhere to run? We don't import this file anywhere yet. So watch this. This is a cool TypeScript feature to know. I need to get like an animation that says, the more you know, and like the little rainbow and star come flying by. This is called a side effect import, I believe. That's what it is. I don't know if that's technically the technical name for it. Technically the technical name, Luke, really? I don't know if that's the actual technical name for it, but I know that's what it does. It's called a side effect import. In the event the server is compiled and running, also run this code in tandem with it. So we're not importing something from somewhere. We're simply saying, find this path and run that file. So when the server starts, it's going to run this file first as a side effect, which means Passport will initialize with these strategies coded on it. There's a different way we can do this, but that's cool, and I figured y'all would want to know how one way to do that is. Now, I wish I could tell you where we fought the good fight, but we're not quite done yet. There is something that's unique about Passport we have to learn the hard way. It is not opinionated one way or another for, remember from the previous lectures, not walkthroughs, but the original auth lecture, stateful sessions versus stateless, send token, call it a day. It's not opinionated between those two, but there is one thing that they share in common. And that thing they share in common is called serializing a user. What do I mean by that? Follow along, because you're probably going to get this error at some point, and I want y'all to know what it is. So step one, we have initialized Passport and connected Passport to our Express servers. Before that step happens, we wired up Passport to use a local strategy that ran our login information for us. Thirdly, now that that's done and it's connected to our Express server, how do I use it as a middleware over here? Well, watch this. I'm going to copy and paste that top import and import Passport over here now in my login endpoint. We're going to take this Passport feature right there, and if you wanted to, we're not going to use anything from Passport other than one particular function. So instead of importing the entire Passport functionality, we can choose to import a specific thing from it. And that specific thing is called authenticate. And authenticate is a middleware function we can use right here in between our path and our callback. So this has to pass through this filter first, almost like a bouncer at a bar. It's going to have to pass through this before it winds up here. And this authenticate needs to have a string that refers to the strategy, which again, the reason I know this is because I had to look it up in its documentation of what the string value is for the strategy you wish to use. So this string local authenticate tells it, feed that feed the incoming request, that rec.body email, rec.body password, feed it into the strategy called authenticate local. It feeds it through here and runs this callback async function that tries to find the email, compare the passwords, and call done null user found or done null false. So we're going to leave that res JSON please here because we're not going to talk about the token quite yet. Let's go see if our code's running with any errors. Oh, it's not running at all, so good thing I checked. Wait for my Webpack output. There it is. And send. Here's the error that took me so long to understand, because it says failed to serialize user into session, right? So how do we get around that? Well, first off, some of y'all that look through the documentation might know that there's an extra options object here. Matter of fact, I haven't played with this one before, so let's do it. We're doing it live, y'all. What if I do session false, right? There's a property called session, and we're saying this is not a session or stateful-based workflow, so turn that crap off. I don't know if that's the default value of session or not, again, because sometimes I use passports, sometimes I don't, but some of y'all have thrown that solution at me and have seen me code it in previous videos as I thought it was just a sole requirement. But it still ends up failing and you're like, what the heck? We just said session's false, so stop it, right? Maybe it didn't save in time. No, same thing. So like I said, between the stateful and stateless, we're going to get rid of it because I don't think it's needed. I think that's the default value. Because it doesn't really have an opinion one way or another of how those are wired up. This done, null, and user found argument right here, how does it know what to do with user found? How does it send user found when it's done over to here, and how do we access it? Well, that's what I'm here to teach you. So it creates a property called rec.user. TypeScript right now is probably fine. Yeah, it's saying, hey, you can make a user. I don't care. Go for it. But we're gonna have to tell what tell it what rec.user ends up being. But check it out. Rec.user. How does it know how to populate rec.user? That's what the done function does. It says done null and takes this user found variable and adds it as the values of rec.user. TypeScript's going to want to know how we got there, and Passport wants to know how that needs to run. So, check it out. We need to, unfortunately, as a collective, just memorize how to write this and remember to write it at least one time somewhere in our Passport code. There's two functions you have to write, one called serialize user and one called deserialize user. All right? So, these two functions take a callback function as their sole argument. Oh my god. And what they take as their arguments are the same thing. I'm pretty sure it's the user value, or our user found, and our done callback. So this value represents whatever we call done with in our second argument. It'll be the user, right? Done, null, no error, user found. Then that user found gets daisy chained up into the serialize user function. And then we simply have to call the following. Done, no error, call user. There are more things you can include in these serialize and deserialize functions, but I wanted to show y'all the bare minimum. Some more. Whoa, that was my cats getting into a fight, if y'all heard that in the microphone. They're friendly like 75% of the time, and the other 25% of the time, only when I'm recording really, is when they decide to get into bad fights. And it looks like my wife just threw Percival in here, so he's in trouble. Percy, you in trouble? Cat fight. So, can't believe that happened while I was recording. So right here, we have these two functions, and we can include more in there, but I want to show y'all just the base level of setup we have to write in order to get away with it. But now that I wrote these two lines of code, look what happens. I got my response, that please response, and let's look at my console logs. If you recall, I was console logging what rec.user is, and now Percival is crying. Percy, come here, buddy. Let's come hang out with us on the camera. Oh, he's not having it. All right, so with the rec.user now, the console log, check it out. It is that user found info we were dealing with earlier. So that's how it works. Rec.user is whatever user information you call done, null, comma, whatever with. That's how it's pieced together. So how do I know who this token belongs to now? How do I know how it works? TypeScript's going to be annoyed at me, and we're going to fix that, so bear with me. Instead of userfound.id, it's rec.user.id. Instead of userfound email, it's request.user.email. And again, TS is unhappy, but this is what we have to do. And we're going to fix that here momentarily. So, what now, right? What now? Let's see if it works. So I'm talking about, can we take this token for the successful login, place it back over here, authorization. I'm going to copy and paste the new token here by removing the old one. Click send. And yeah, we got pizza time, test@test.com. Our response checks out. Let's break the token. Invalid signature, that's what I'm talking about. Paste it back, send it, we're back in. Go back to the login tab. What about some error handling? What if I have a bad email? We got a response of unauthorized. Awesome. I didn't code that. That was coded automatically for me. Let's mess up the password. Test that. Unauthorized, because we messed up the login credentials. And where's that unauthorized coming from? Well, when I call done null false, it simply sets a status code of 401, which has some plain text of unauthorized, has a status message of unauthorized attached to it automatically. And I believe there's a third argument to the done function here, some additional verification options, sometimes called info options, where we can set maybe a message that says invalid credentials, which is what I think I had before, if I'm not mistaken. So let's see what happens when I change it up. Why is it complaining about me now? Try expected. Oh, I managed to delete a curly brace by mistake. There we go. So yeah, let's see what happens if I pass that optional third argument right there. So successful login, no problem. Bad login, we got unauthorized. So yeah, remember when I was talking about having custom error handling with Passport? This unfortunately is not quite enough. There's more steps we would have to do to custom error handle this thing, which again, as I consider a con of Passport, because I had my own custom message appearing in no time in the previous walkthroughs, whereas now, like I said, we're going to have to take an additional step in order to capture this custom information response and custom error handle it from there. So I consider this a con of Passport. If I want to do some custom stuff, I'd have to write yet another function on top of this to make that happen. As a matter of fact, I believe, now we'll get to in a later walkthrough. We're not going to do it now, but that's it. That's all you have to know about this little function right here. And we're back in action making this stuff again. So what about this rec.user shenanigans, huh? Well, I should probably make like a types file somewhere or a types folder, but let's just go ahead and, for now, simply make the interface for it here and export it out of here and have it work that way. So what I could do is say export an interface called the rec user. I can call it pizza for all that it really matters. It's, you know what? No, we're gonna make this on that login router. That makes more sense than the middleware file. So over here, we need to strong type this request object to know what it has .user, and that user has ID and email on it. So watch this. I'm going to make it here like that, rec user. I'm gonna manually strong type this request to use rec user. Now it's really not happy at me because I overrode what the request object is by default. So what I'm going to do now is simply say import the request interface from the express library and combine it with my custom one here. So we're going to write extends request. What that does for me now is it makes it, as you can see the error shifted again, that this rec user interface does what request normally already does. Rec body, rec user, rec whatever. It has all the normal stuff on request. But now it's going to take our custom type and add a little bit of extra stuff to it. So what do we need to worry about? Rec.user.id should be a number in our case. And it should also possibly have email as a string like that. There we go. Now what's it upset about? Because those properties could or could not be there, I'm assuming. Yeah, that's what it was. So in the event that rec.user is there, it may or may not. Rec.user is not always going to be on request. And if it's not, then these properties definitely aren't going to be there. So we just had to make sure they were all optional values for this because we don't have any kind of TypeScript definitions of when we're going to have to worry about this yay being here or nay not being there. So that's why I want to make those properties optional for now. That way we can receive some support. But if I mouse over ID now, it knows it's a number. If I mouse over email, it knows it's a string and not necessarily always there. And that's what you're going to have to add right there to make sure TypeScript is happy with you. And we know the code was working beforehand anyway when I had successful logins, but just to prove it still works, there's that tidbit. Take this token, take it back over here, paste it, send it. We still get test@test.com as our validated token. That'll about cover it for this walkthrough of Passport Local. Like I said, it seems like a little bit of extra work to get the same thing going. Kind of is, but the next one we'll see how Passport JWT can help us in this whole workflow here. And then I'll talk about some additional information after that, and then that'll about cover it for authentication, y'all. I'm so sad to stop talking, but see you in the next video.